to the Universal Ones Artist Collective. I am your host, Buddy James. Please don't forget to subscribe and like our channel. And always, if you like our content, hit that bell because that's how we get seen. Thank you again. Enjoy the episode.
Episode 18, Will Dale, Season 1. Enjoy.
Buddy,
Yes, it is.
how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. How you doing today?
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I already started recording the show for a genuine welcome and saying hello purposes. So how's it going today? Well, I guess I'll address the audience and I'll say welcome to the Universal Ones Artist Collective. And I think this is episode 16, 17. I guess I'll have to refer to it. But that'll all be done in the beginning anyway. So you're out in Florida. How you feeling today?
Feeling good. Feeling real good.
All right, and we have
just out running errands right now, actually.
and you are Will Dale.
Yeah.
Do you go by William or Will?
Yeah, Will generally. Yeah.
Nice, awesome. And we first met with a call from Dale Pond.
Yes,
We
sir.
did a three-way call with Dale Pond. So you're on another episode already on this show. And I was impressed with just some of the stuff that I heard and you in general. So I wanted to talk more with you and get to know you as a person.
Absolutely. We had that call had Jeremy Pfeiffer on it as well, as I recall.
Oh, was it a four-way? Yeah, it was a four-way.
Yeah.
Nice.
Jeremy joined
Good call.
with us. Yeah. So yeah, it's been. I've worked with Dale for a while there, he just worked in a lab with him and had a great time tutorage with Dale and mentorship there that he had with me. And we still continue that now. I just needed to relocate, come back to Florida, and take care of some family business and whatnot. So here I am in Florida.
Nice. Yeah, life happens, man. That's exactly what happens. Life happens. And
but I was really impressed with some of your stuff too. A lot of your artwork and things shows a good intimate knowledge of at least the geometric and proportional patterning that underlies matter and energy interactions. So I was very impressed with that, and that you had obviously a good knowledge of some fundamental principles. So I also wanted to be able to get a chance to talk with you some more and kind of flesh some of that out with what you've got going
on. Yeah, so the feeling is definitely mutual here, for sure. So I got my screen on. I was trying to open up a folder, but my computer's working like a dinosaur right now for whatever reason. So I'll pull us into Love is Watching then.
Sounds good.
So are you a content creator? What is your forte? What do you like to create, or what are you interested in about these dynamics?
For me, I just really wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been really curious, really wanted to know. So that took the route for me to understand things at the most fundamental level that I could. And so throughout my studies and discoveries and things, I just was led kind of down a path where I looked at a lot of things that I saw around, standard model physics, things like that. But then there were so many, to me, so many things that were not quite explained. So I looked elsewhere, alternative science, things like that. But then I looked at, I wanted to have good information. So a lot of that stuff is, it can be difficult to correlate to anything that's that you can work with empirically, like design experiments and things. It can be difficult. Nomenclature, things like that. Everybody's got their own lexicon. Everybody's got their their own way of describing phenomenon and things like that. So going back and studying from, even most of the stuff I studied was late 19th century, mid to late 19th century. Keeley, Tesla, guys like that, Stubblefield, just anywhere that it seemed like there were things that the anomalies would match up to. So I said, well, somebody's got it figured out. Just because it's not in the standard literature doesn't mean it's not right. Mm-hmm. So that's what led me into unified physics and that kind of thing. Just curiosity, wanted to know. And what do I do with it? Mostly, it's just been a lot of research. And now that I feel like I've got a better grasp on some of the fundamentals, I'd like to start moving into experimentation and things like that. Not exactly sure where that goes. I've been on some projects, a few experimental projects, things like that. I've done some consulting on some projects, but I would like to run some projects completely of my own. I have a few in mind.
So you were were you apprenticing underneath Dale Pond?
In a manner of speaking, it wasn't like an official apprenticeship, but yes. And we moved to La Junta there and lived there for about 2 years, and worked with Dale at the Pond Science Institute and learned a lot from Dale. And, studied a lot of what he had going on with sound and vibration. So that fleshed in a lot of key points for me where I was able to start to get a grasp of what fundamental and unified physics really looks like.
Yeah, it makes me want to pull up his page right now. Sympathetic vibratory physics, SVP. Yeah, that was a big part of me growing up. After I had my vision and tapping into sympathetic vibratory physics, reading about it, learning about it. That was back. Man, I don't know how long he's had it going, but that'd be back in like 2003, 2004, 2005. Okay. Oh, well, you got to go to oops. Oh, I'm botching it all up. Okay, so it's probably easiest to just type it into Facebook and go to his page from search here.
SVPwiki.com is a good way to get there.
Okay, SVPwiki.
Wiki site.
SVP. Maybe that was the wrong one. It's right here. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So this the geometry, it just reminds me of that image that I just recently had up here from Gabriel Kaliman, and the chambers and subchambers, and you're probably familiar with
Mm-hmm.
spiral sound temples.
Say that again?
Spiral sound temples. Mikey Bergman, you might have heard of him. He's building. He's going to be on one of the shows here, but his computer just tanked, so he's got to get that up and running. But anyway, but he builds these sound temples that are based on phi spiral, and they look like this, and some just chambers in general have me fascinated. And this also reminds me of an onion. Are you familiar with Gabriel Kaliman's work?
I'm not, but I'm familiar with the concept of architectural design with sacred geometry and phi ratios, things like that. So I can understand kind of where he's going.
Yeah. His geometry is really, really interesting, and his drawings. But I was trying to relate that to some of what are those machines that Dale has built?
The dinospheres.
Dinospheres, that's the word I was looking for. Reminded me of actually this next Saturday, the geometric view. We're doing the geometry of sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm learning a lot, and I love learning. And there were some questions on Facebook popping around about the energy of nested spheres. Do you know much about the energy of nested spheres? And are these nested spheres in here? I forget.
You'd have to be a little more specific.
Like a sphere? Is there another sphere inside here?
I don't have the page
Oh,
on me right now.
I didn't know if you might know or not. But I'm interested in the way that spheres nest, and energy that might be produced from nesting spheres. Because I'm just kind of commenting loosely on this image. The you can totally see if the Earth were to be like here, and these were to be the winds, and this were to be the Birkeland current coming down on the top. Then these nested spheres and these nested chambers play a big role in energy distribution and current density and currents and winds and trade winds.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like what you're talking about are the three-dimensional propagation of wave interactions, which would be roughly spherical in shape,
Mm-hmm.
and in a medium, let's say a vacuum, a roughly homogeneous medium, it would be roughly spherical in their propagation, directional propagation. But all those, there are a lot of things. It depends on what kind of energy are you talking about. So, sound energy behaves and propagates differently depending on the structures and things that are around. If you have trees or walls or egg crates or something like that, it changes how the sound propagates throughout the environment. So if depends on the types of energies that you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of parameters. Like if this was a human here yelling, and the propagation of the sound moving in the inverse square or the inverse cube outward, spherical wave fronts tend to do the inverse square, inverse cubic wave fields, spherical bubbles, like little.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It almost makes me wonder if there's like a density that they fall to. There's nothing here. Anything that is here pulls to this or this wavefront. You know what I mean? For a sound as it pulls and stretches.
As a kind of a general speculative idea, you could look at, say, black holes or something like that, where essentially your matter and all that is getting more and more dense up to the point where basically at this point we really can't calculate it. It gets to this level of singularity, goes beyond our ability to calculate. Essentially, the values of motion and vectors and all that kind of go to infinite, and we don't really know what happens from a standard model view.
Right.
But if you look at it from a slightly different view, like from a sympathetic vibratory physics view, those things can then, rather than going to singularity and just short circuiting your ability to understand and calculate what goes on there, if you can understand that it goes to a certain level, like say you get to 1. There's no 0, so you'll get to 1 level density, and then it flips out and reverses, coming back out the other side, the other direction. That concept is a little hinky because directionality and so forth in sorry, I'm driving here. Hold on.
That's all right.
They're really, it's hard to say that there would be directionality under those kinds of conditions where you're in that equilibrium state of no matter or energy interaction. So that's basically where you get down to that kind of a state, and then it flips back out and it goes again, because if you look at the nature of like fractal and holographic geometries and things, they repeat, and they'll, rather than end, it will just basically like fold in on itself and then infold and then unfold. So when you talk about nesting spheres, basically being able to infold on themselves and then unfold and nest internally and externally at the same time, that to me, in my estimation, that would be more accurate to how physical energy and matter actually interact.
Yeah, and then there's absorption and based off of different densities of materials and porousness and everything else.
That comes in my mind, that comes in at a higher level where you're actually dealing with matter. You're looking at matter interactions versus the
sound
fundamental level of energetic patterning interactions, the underlying things that come on. What you're talking about is our parameters and things like length, height, width, density. Those things don't come about until after the energetic patterns become dense enough to actually manifest as physical matter or energy interactions, electromagnetics, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you're talking about more like an origin point source, and then once out here, uh, the sound or the wave or the propagation can then unfold into different things, or even unfold into itself.
Correct.
And which is great. And I think the same way that sound actually eventually becomes beings through resonance, coherent, cohesive beings, creatures, and creatures are sung into existence by necessity from other creatures singing, and the Schumann resonance, and us being in the Schumann cavity, a combination of synergism in the food cycle, nested animal and hierarchies, hierarchical nested animal stacking, um, moves. I think the entire thing is acoustic, and when we have a catastrophic event, in all life is, or the majority of life is destroyed or changed, or not there anymore on the planet, and then rapid speciation happens afterward. It's just like these ripples here coming off the speaker, these cycles,
Sure.
cyclical.
I can say you said a lot there.
Yeah, kind of do that sometimes.
You covered a lot of ground. No, I know exactly. I know exactly where you're at with that kind of thing.
Well, I'm trying to get to the point of actually creating creatures with sound, speaking them into existence, because that's what we do. That's what life is. It's spoken. We speak life into each other's bones or death, and we speak people into gods, by gossip, or destroy their lives by gossip, and also actual tangible living things. Enjoy being spoken to, talked to, plants, animals, enjoy affection, and how much affection is involved in these wave fronts here of sound, or at least touch.
I'll say this. Sound is a way of getting at all of the matter and energy interactions in the universe. But
that's a good way to say it.
Sure. So sound is, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, the chart of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it starts on one end and it kind of rainbows out to the other end there. So you'll have low frequencies on one end, high frequencies on the other end.
Yep, I'm pulling it up here. Oh, whoops.
So, but on that chart, you'll start with lower frequency things like audible sound, things like that, and you're getting up into higher frequency things, and then you're getting up into radio, and then you're getting up into light waves. Well, now all of a sudden, when you start getting into light wave frequencies, now you're talking about matter, physical matter, photons.
Yeah. Does the electromagnetic spectrum all evolve just to become physical? Is there something special about being the physical properties of particulate light? I'm sure there's
That's a good question.
I'm sure there's other freedoms out here, out here, and the other parts of the spectrums, like plasmas and stuff, like in ghosts and energies in plasma. But it's almost like there's an encouragement to want to become particulate from the rest of the electromagnetic spectrum. You know what I mean? And I've been thinking about that. Like, does the whole cyclicity and the whole cycle of the EM spectrum, or the EM, I'd say nested toruses, the EM Ouroboros. I look at the electromagnetic spectrum like an Ouroboros. If we could pull up an Ouroboros, I think it makes more sense. That they have it as a linear line there, as a linear progression, but once it scoops back
Right.
onto its bottom because it
Right.
gets so tight and small down here, it opens back up and then.
Right.
So go ahead. Sorry, I said a lot again. You there, Will? You might have muted your mic.
They don't call it matter. Well, what about frequencies that are not as high? So sound frequencies, radio frequencies, things like that. Those aren't considered matter. Why? They're
Russell,
just slower vibrations.
right.
So I look at things like that and I say, that to me right there is a clue that we're missing out on something in that model of trying to say one thing is matter, one thing is not matter, or one thing is a type of energy that can be used to interact with the fundamentals of the universe, and another thing is not. So sound, light, anything that's within that electromagnetic spectrum interacts with everything else that's there as well. Everything in the universe interacts with everything else. It's feedback, feed forward. Everything interacts.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's inducted and induced by other parts of its cycles too. Like,
right.
I
That being
was
the case, sound or light or any of those mediums, you can use microwaves, radio, X-rays, whatever. That they're basically like you could look at them like not chords, but scales. I'm blanking out on the
Yeah,
word.
different. That's a good one. Different scales of itself.
Right. And so, audible sound, vibration, physical, mechanical, longitudinal vibrations. Those are one scale, and then you get up into radio frequencies, things like that. That's another scale. And you
Yeah.
get up into higher frequencies and gamma and X-rays and all that. Those are more octaves.
Yes.
Octaves. That's
Yes.
the word I was looking for.
Yes.
And there are people like Walter Russell. He worked with the concept of octaves in the periodic table. And so again, if that's the case, if he is at all accurate there, then once again, that tells you that you can apply the principles of being able to use any type of medium, whether it be chemical or radio or what have you, to interact with matter and energy. If you do it properly, then you can get the results that you're looking for out of that interaction. Figuring out how to do that's the trick.
Right. Exactly. When you were talking, it reminded me of the nested layers of. This was on the geometric view this last weekend. Um, it's a kaleidoscopic nested filamentary structure. And when you go out so far into the octaves of light, like you were talking, things break down into ionized potentials, which are different ionized gases. Everything breaks down into ionized gases that are coming off of the sun. The spicules that are coming off of the sun break down into these nested layers of ionized gases. And through Markland convection breaks down. So this would be one element right here. This would be another element. This would be a heavier element. This would be a heavier element, or lighter or heavier, vice versa. I would suppose the heavier ones would be more towards the core, and the lighter ones would be towards the outer. But just the thoughts of thinking about Markland convection, Birkeland currents, in association with the electromagnetic spectrum and how it nests itself like this, that gives me a really lucid experience to understand the different octaves. Each one of these is a different octave of sound as well. So this would be C, D, E, F, or C, D, E, F, G, and lower or whatever, and suboctaves nested inside of it, because waves and wave geometry moves inside of these filamentary types of networks as well.
Okay.
Which is exactly what we were just talking about, light and how light breaks apart. And it really interests me. I have a lot of questions. If electromagnetism is conscious and light is evolving, and we are just one step in light's cycle, and we are human, just like different animals are different steps in light's cycle. If it is getting more lucid or conscious or aware, um, uh, I I guess what is it? I guess the magnetic spectrum is getting, maybe it's riding up one of these crests to get more lucid, and then we get dumber because there's events in history where we lose our minds, and we forget our languages, and languages become confused, and
What it sounds like you're talking about
cool.
is the idea that the cyclical nature of matter and energy patterns, like the Big Bang. Everything comes out of the Big Bang. The universe is constantly expanding faster and faster, but then also you have things like black holes that are reordering all the matter around them and bringing it back into that equilibrium state. So you have a constant expansion, but then a constant contraction through all these black holes and things like that. Centers of galaxies, supermassive black holes, that kind of thing. What it looks like is that those things may actually be reordering matter and then basically rendering it back into a state of equilibrium. See terminology that you could use for that, like virtual particle flux, 0 point state, those kinds of things, state of equilibrium. So that in there lies a recurring cyclical nature to the fundamental characteristic of the universe, if you buy into that,
like the reset button
paradigm.
Yeah,
It's sure, but a reset button is like a on-demand kind of thing, where this is intrinsic. It's passive. It's happening all the time. It's part of the system of the universe. Part of the expansion is the contraction and reordering.
That would be interesting.
That being a fundamental, if you take that as a fundamental characteristic of the universe, matter and energy and all those things have a cyclical nature, then the things that you're talking about too, cultural things, would have cyclical natures. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. Everything really that we can look at in nature or even in man-made types of structures and institutions and such, they all have cycles.
Well, what I think what I was getting at, and when you were talking, it totally hit me as this. Okay, this is reset. This is X-class solar flare reset for Earth. Then we ride down. Life becomes abundant. Then we're at our low, and we have the ice age that are cyclical. Then an X-class solar flare that wipes out the like a 4 or 5 X-class solar flare that wipes out civilization. Then it comes back. We ride the wave, or we ride the wave when it comes back up X class. You know what I mean?
I'm not really familiar with some of the terminology that you use in X-class solar flares.
So there's this is okay. Let's say we're going through the solar system, and if I were to pull up the solar system, or we're going through the galactic plane.
I'm assuming an X-class solar flare is something that's on the order of global killer, fries all your electronics and irradiates the surface of the Earth, kind of thing.
Yep. So it does that like at the peak, at the trough, you know, and that's just natural because nature, when it does that, when nature does that, and everything dies, the memories are resonant inside of the earth, and the creatures are resonant, and then as they come back to life through speciation, because there's been many cycles of catastrophe and catastrophism, one after another, and I'm just relating the two from our motion in the galaxy to waves and the cyclical nature of waves as they ride up and down on the troughs through the 11-year cycles of moving around the sun, and how everything comes from, all of our weather comes from the sun, and all of the energy for life and the food chain and all creatures come from the sun. So I guess getting back to that filamental wrapping up structure, the nesting nature of sound works in the same manner, and once sound from the sun comes out far enough and it goes through so many cycles of magnitude, it starts to create beings naturally. So I don't know. I was just getting into making a relation between sound and the correlations between life and really the structure of Birkeland currents and why it's important. The geometry is important because we can create things like telescopes to start to look at these things in a different nature. I really want to inspire people.
Specifically, you're talking specifically telescopes that we can use to see Birkeland currents or document Birkeland current.
I'm talking about going into the universe. There is a neural network that the universe has, and going into this fossilized neural networks is possible. And the geometry, I'm displaying the geometry of how to get into these. And I'm publishing a book later this year about called The Universe Game. And it is about getting into these tendrils, these fibers, understanding our connection with them, because the nature of our nerves is this exact same geometry. The nature of our collagen in our muscles and in our skin is this exact same geometry. And so we can, and I believe our bioplasma and our biospheres and our energies use this type of retractable, kaleidoscopic. This is called a Bessel function, and waves move in Bessel functions. So I think that there's a way to I think our brains are already equipped with the way how to get into this space. And we might already do it every night with the release of DMT and the combination of sleeping. The people that can sleep, because some people have a hard time sleeping.
It sounds like what you're getting at is basically, there's a philosophy that the ultimate technology is the technology of biology.
Yes, in nature, biomimicry.
Right. And so the ultimate, the
Technology.
ultimate of technological advancement, it would be essentially the ability to interact with, matter and energy on the level of, say, thought and emotion.
Yes, and sound.
At will.
Yes.
Because that's what we deal with as human beings. Our technology would be electromagnetically based through thought and emotion, most likely.
Yeah, and a little bit of haptic sensors, but I think the haptic sensors, I mean, we're going to use devices to start to get in, like neural networks and neural net and different things like that. Once we start using,
we're already doing those things.
Right.
We're already doing integration with prosthetics, things like that. AI chips and things that people are getting placed into their heads to help with nerve damage. And I'm not real up on how that goes, so I won't speak too in depth about it. And again, that's one of the things you started to talk about some things. I was just being in general, a very general statement that the ultimate technology could be considered human technology or biological technology.
Yeah.
In that things like, so look at things like telekinesis, things of that nature, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all those kinds of things. And if you're viewing it from the standpoint of sympathetic vibratory physics, then those things have a basis that makes them plausible as actual physical phenomena. And that stuff you can go look that up, Princeton, Perry University, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of research that's been done, even in standard model physics and standard model science, that basically, that basically allows you to say, okay, well, there's at least something there for the curious, the things that don't necessarily add up or just can't be explained away or ignored. And then you start there. And you say things like, well, if this was a real thing, what would that look like? And then you just basically work backwards to try, from, again, like I said, from those more general fundamental, and these are essentially, thought experiments. So you look at something, you conceptualize the systems that you're working with, and then you come up with an educated guess as to what you think will happen. And again, that's all speculation until you can actually design experiments and run them on the bench. And there are a lot of guys that are doing that, and a lot of stuff that's already been done. So,
like, if you play music for cows, they produce more milk, they're happier, mm-hmm. and their meat tastes better.
Right.
I would assume it's the same on all scales in all nature. That trees induce certain, they draw the attention of certain talons of certain birds at certain times and certain windows at certain seasons. But they like the attention. They like the squirrels. They like to be tickled and touched. They feel good. I think they feel. And recently, science is showing that they make a horrible screeching noise when you cut off a limb.
Mm-hmm.
So it's showing, the universe is showing itself to be a lot more conscious. And, with the advent of the internet, it's allowing us to know that it's more conscious. What we do with that information is is whatever we're going to do with it, but at least we know it's conscious. So, like, the vegetarians, you're not stopping to hurt. Uh, you're hurting
Right.
something
Well, you
that's going to
say
cry anyway
you
or
say
scream.
conscious, right? You say conscious, and I think that may be for me when we're talking about consciousness on the level of matter and energy, then I don't think you can really relate that to what we generally
That's what I'm trying to bridge the gap to
get
do,
at
though.
as human consciousness. I really doubt that there's if you can look at it in a way where rocks we don't necessarily know. We don't know. Do they think? Do they have opinions? We
Well,
don't know.
I
Do
don't
they
believe necessarily.
interact?
Yeah,
Yes.
and
Do they
there's my
do they transmit information and interact with the whole rest of the universe? Yes. Is that, are you communicating? If you're communicating, does that indicate some level of consciousness? I would say so. Because, at the fundamental level, what is consciousness? Yeah, and if you can answer that as, well, consciousness is the fact that the entire everything in it communicates back and forth. It exchanges information.
yeah.
At least at the fundamental level, we can say that there is consciousness in the universe because everything that is exchanges information. But that's about as far as I can go to say what that means.
Right. I think that there is a steady stream of let me type in uh, I think that there's a steady stream of information coming from the sun, and every single creature, morphogenetic resonance, global morphogenetic resonance, which probably uh, starts winding and binds in here somewhere. And there's nesting inside of creatures, but whether it's in here or in here, wherever the binding starts, the information comes out of the sun, and um, out of efficiency, it wraps into coils that are nested inside of each other, like the image I was showing here, spiraling. And these are Birkeland currents, and this is what we're showing comes off the sun, and they're nested. But I'm supposing that the ingredients and the information for the morphic resonance is supplied through these straws and these tubes, and they're intersexed mated pairs, like Walter Russell was talking about, and that's why in the vertebrate kingdom there's mostly two sexes for all species. I believe there's only two sexes for each species, or two sexes generally, but they wrap around each other in double wound coils, um, like some other geometry that I pulled up and put together, and and it's and you can't have certain creatures without the outer skin or sheath of the other sheath that holds that character or that creature inside, and that line inside that bound. Creatures are bound or stacked in a way that's comes out of the sun, and when we go through a cycle of catastrophe, that information is still there. Therefore, after the flare, life can thrive and start over again, and the same amount of creatures come out because the same amount of filaments are still there with the energies, but all of the creatures are all morphed. No one knows how this happens, and I think I have a good theory based in geometry, both quantitative and qualitative numbers of geometry, of wrapped filaments that show how creatures bind, like Russell was talking about. And this is, I'm reading into Russell's work later because I hit it hard in 2005, 2 years after I had the geometry happen to me. And now I'm starting to realize that the mated pairs are the spiral vortices, and he used the same geometry as I used, but I think I went deeper and then turned it and created a different set than, and which included both geometries of the the cube and the octahedron, uh, cube octa, and the cube octahedron basically. But that's neither here nor there. Sorry, I went too deep into my own metaphorical thinking in my head. But I was trying to paint a picture here where this geometry comes from the sun, from people who give the credit to the creator who gave us the visions for these things. Just like when we sleep at night, we have dreams, and just chasing your dreams is a thing, and it's I think we should chase our dreams more, because who knows where they come from, at least the good dreams, you know.
So again, a lot there. So you talked some about the sun, about morphogenic fields, things like that. Understand that the way I would look at something like that would be, you can say that the sun would potentially have a strong influence on conditions here on the Earth, because we are close to the sun. But that's not the only influence that's going on.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Right. When you try to analyze a system, there's always some degree of, you have to create a sort of an imaginary boundary and within which is the system that you want to analyze. Otherwise, you have to take into account every variable in the universe, which would be infinite variables, and so then you can't have any predictive analysis of your system. Now, taking that system and creating the imaginary boundary to get a better idea of what a localized system of matter and energy is doing, that's only half the work. Once you think you've got it figured out, you've got to put that system back into the hole, so to speak, remove those boundaries and see if it works when you plug it back into the overall universal systems. if you do it correctly, if you've got all of your concepts and calculations correct, then you should be able to do that. Again, working on the premise that the universe is a whole system.
Exactly. You got the moon. You got other tendrils and other filaments that are coming and feeding us, like Mercury and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. We go through their filamentary networks and we get bombarded and get fed with space dust constantly from these other planets.
Right. Well, and again, so when you're talking specifically about the sun, you have to take into account too that the sun, in its portion of the network, all of the information is coming into the sun from its connections, and then it's rebroadcasting, so to speak, that information, or relaying that information to its surroundings, and we're part of that system.
Exactly. Like, where's the energy that feeds the sun, the circuit that feeds the sun, and maybe we can see the energy that's coming off of that, find that source, and then find other humanoid lives, because we came from that circuit, and therefore maybe there might be humans in that other circuit that's powering the sun.
Okay. Like humans are powering the sun, like as far as
No. There's a big download, a circuit, a Birkeland current that powers the sun. Like you were talking about, the information that's powering the sun, who knows where that's coming from. It's not burning from within. It's not burning from within outward. We already know that from pictures. We know that there's a preponderance of energy coming out top the poles, like this, like star formation, the geometry of star formation and nucleation. But if we could go into, I'll look up.
We'll say from say a sympathetic vibratory physics standpoint, you could look at a star like the sun. In sympathetic vibratory physics, the fundamental impetus behind motion and matter and energy interaction is the neutral center, and again, that's very much like a state of equilibrium.
Right here, the axis of rotation. In this image.
Who knows?
Right. Kind of like a stillness.
On what you can speculate on what that would look like. Essentially, in my mind, it would be like you can conceptualize it as just a ball of whatever we're going to call non-relative motion. What does that look like? Is it moving? Who knows? It's non-relative to you. You have no frame of reference to say what it's doing. So that equilibrium state is kind of think of it as what you will, because your concept is just as accurate as anybody else's.
Well, here's
what it is.
Here's a good one. If you look at this image, magnetospheres, when they kiss and pinch, look at that pinching hourglass shape of stillness or power or who knows what.
Right.
Motionless.
What I'll say there is that is still a representation of interaction.
Something,
and
yeah.
When you're talking about this zero state, it's like it can be considered as a sort of a pre-matter state. There's no such thing as matter there. Matter is movement and interaction. And
I think there's a geometry to it, though.
Complete in and of its own. Yes, absolutely. That's.
Yeah. I think there's a geometry to it, and what you're talking about is like it's a process. It is a cascade. and the beginning of the cascade you can't see until a certain point, until it manifests. There's a pre-designed, pre-geometry to it until we can see it.
Yeah, there's so say Tom Bearden, he talks about it in a video. Let me see, radionics, action at a distance. The way he describes it is that there's this equilibrium state isn't actually totally neutral, non-relative, non-interactive. It's sort of a chaos that equals out to chaotic interactions that equals out to a null state, no real measurable interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, basically the theory goes that as you can put energy into any organization within that null state, that chaotic null state, it would have, it either has one of two types of characteristics. Either it's completely random or it's chaotic. If it's random, then any patterns that come out of it are just accidental. For me, that's a non sequitur. So for me, it's got to be chaotic. If it's chaotic, then there's order. Even though you may not be able to make out those patterns if they're moving, changing too quickly, for your
too dynamic
mental scale. That's too dynamic to really conceive of.
Yeah. However, I like that. I like that thought. We have to return to that. Systems that seem too dynamic to comprehend.
Right. There's in a chaotic system, every kind of order would exist. And when you say every kind of order would exist, that means everything that could possibly exist in the universe would have to exist in, he calls them like in ghost form. And what he means by that is that the density of those forms in the we'll call them, virtual particle flux forms, just to have some kind of hard concept of what we're looking at. Those ghost forms, if you were to put energy into them through whatever means, then they will become more dense. So you pick any type of form that you want. If you can create the waveforms that will allow that form to become more dense, then it becomes more real. The more dense it becomes, the more real it becomes. The more dense the energy patterns become, the more real it becomes. The more real it becomes, it eventually manifests as physical phenomena or matter interaction.
That's intention to thought to reality to form.
Right.
That's great. That's awesome. That's like the solidity of we showed. Okay, I'm just gonna have to go back to it because this blew my mind. And never had structure because I knew it and learned it, but forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like when we started looking at it, we were like, oh, what? Look at the nesting, because this was just this last Saturday. We did this filament episode, which you're welcome to come on the Electric View Saturdays. It's a weekly show. All right. So we'd love for you to come on. Just listen, pipe in if you feel like you want to say something, or say a lot. But it's a fun time. So I can add you on the list.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be awesome to have you. So yeah, I mean, look at that, and then there's other pictures. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm just going to use that axon structure.
Yeah, and probably like I cannot see what's going on your screen right now. Like I said, I'm just on my phone right now, and I'm not very Skype literate. But
Okay.
if you will, if you'll send those links over Messenger or something.
Oh, it'll be on
That
the show.
all
You'll
right,
be able to
excellent.
see what we were talking about. That's great. You should be able to touch your phone and like tap out of the conversation and then tap back in or something. Go to the comments and then tap my face. Um, and it might pop back on because you should be able to see what I'm laying out on the phone. But
Gotcha.
either or. So yeah, this structure, forming a thought, hitting a neuron hard, that axon, that nucleus of the axon, the node river, the river of the node. I mean, this sounds delicious and wonderful. Just recursive thoughts that build beautiful things, build beautiful tendons, build beautiful brains, healthy brains. It's your thoughts that sometimes after something, some interference.
Technical difficulties, probably some solar flares interrupting our technology.
Let me share my screen and hop right back into what I was saying because, dude, I went somewhere cool.
All right.
So, excuse me. So, what I was talking about is have a solid thought, building a solid, good thought builds solid, healthy bodies, recurrent thoughts build strong fibers, and the music helps build the fibers stronger. When you cry, it produces heightened senses and it hardens your neural network. So the more times you cry and have heightened experiences based off of crying, um, then uh, you will have a healthier, stronger brain. Crying good tears is what I'm saying, like tears of joy, good tears to music, tears to uh, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
look at the node of the river, the nucleus. These build stronger, and that's what I'm saying, man. I like to focus the episodes a lot about uh, health and mental health and different types of health and how this can be healing, how the shows can be healing for people. So one of them on this episode is clearly healthy gut, healthy mind, healthy body, and healthy thoughts. Don't let thoughts, you control your body and your reality. If you control your thoughts, you control your body. Thought first. And that's reaching out into the universe. This is your thought. It isn't something that's in your body. It's out in the air. You're an antenna, you're a receiver, you're a transceiver. You receive things and you transmit signals.
That would follow um, the concept of feedback and feed forward. Communication to bidirectional communication or information exchange at a fundamental level. So again, all those things that you're talking about would be certainly theoretically possible.
You all right?
Sorry. Yep.
Don't get
Sorry.
hurt. Be careful. Sounds
Well,
like you're
all those things
bartending or something.
would be theoretically possible from the standpoint of having a unified physics approach to it, or a sympathetic vibratory physics approach to it.
Yeah.
Any paradigm where you're coming from a holistic approach would in my estimation have to dictate that there is that bidirectional information exchange at the fundamental level, which means that all information systems being based on that, matter, energy, they all have their informational components too. And so there would be a component of that in all matter and energy interactions.
What the in good Lord are you doing? I have to ask.
Oh,
there's a lot of noise.
Currently am going through a storage shed and making some room to move a few items in and out and do a little exchange on inventory there. And they got an automatic door and stuff, so it goes off every time I get close to it. So just packing everything up, and that's what you're hearing is all the glassware and.
Oh, I had to ask. Curious minds must know.
Absolutely. Well, that's what brings us here. I think in the first place is that we are curious people to start out with. Kind of the nature of what draws people to want to know about the secrets of the universe, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's a requirement.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It's not a prerequisite. It's a requirement. A necessity.
Yeah, it just seems to follow that if you just don't have that curious nature, you never ask those questions that lead you down the rabbit holes that we go down. So
right. Well, I love your insight, and I'm trying to keep these shorter, and I'm not even sure how long we went. It was probably over an hour, so I'm trying to keep them a little shorter. Is there any ending remarks or anything you want to touch on before we depart for the evening? And I'll invite you to the geometric view for next weekend. We're doing the geometry of sound.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. I'm definitely interested in checking that out.
Awesome.
As far as parting thoughts, well, we covered a lot of ground, and you I can tell that you've got a lot of information and a lot of things going around in your head. By the way that you describe some of the stuff, and you get into detail on things sometimes, and it's hard to follow because you know so much more than on certain subjects than I do. But clearly you have a depth of knowledge, and I'm definitely interested in maintaining a communication with you and learning more about that.
Well, this conversation has been very stimulating for me, and it's made me want to design some more graphs to help explain some of what I'm talking about. Because man, it's just good to free flow conversation with someone, someone who's intelligent and has that sympathetic vibratory background. Dude, you're gonna be freaking awesome on the show, man. Yeah, I'm excited, Dale. I'm excited. Or Will. It's I get confused because it's Will Dale.
Yes. Yep.
So, but that's an awesome name, and it was it threw me off because both you guys were had a Dale in your name. For the first time we met, I was like, wait a minute.
Wait,
Dale Pond and Will Dale.
Will Dale.
You're like, I know the direction to go, not because of my name, because I know the flow.
Exactly.
Well, great talk. Good getting to know you more. Sorry I talked too much about my own crap when I was trying to get more about you and your stuff. I pontificate sometimes. I'm sorry, bro.
Hey, listen, for me, I know sometimes it can be difficult finding people that you can relate to and talk to
Yes.
about certain subjects, and so it's sometimes you get really excited and you want to talk about all the things that you've run across in the last 20 years.
Right. I know I'm an
Just
amalgamation of that
because,
sometimes.
right? Just because you've got somebody in front of you that could actually understand it.
I know I do that, and I have to be a little more sympathetic with some people. Test the waters, say a couple names before I enter a conversation. Like, that's
Right, right.
do you know Walter Russell? Okay, then they're never gonna know what I'm
No,
talking about.
never
Do you
mind.
know Keeley? Well, I'm not even gonna ask if you know Keeley if you don't know Russell.
Right.
you know. Okay, wait a minute. Do you know uh Rupert Sheldrake? And okay,
Right.
never mind. We're not going to be able to talk about anything. uh, so yeah, I mean, it's clear. It's clear vision once people have these fractal minds and electric eyes or fractal eyes. You build a different body. You build a different perception, a different sensory awareness, almost.
Well, if you want to, kind of go down that road, if you look at, say, the way that your neurology goes and your brain cells grow, I'm not a neurologist, and
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you all the proper scientific words to use to describe these phenomena, but basically, when you learn new things, your neurons grow into different patterns. So when you start to learn things about sacred geometry, pi ratios, things that are related to the fundamental patterning behind matter and energy in the universe, then the physical structure of your brain changes as well. Whether there's a correlation between the physical structure of your brain becomes more fractalized or something, I can't say, but
Right.
it might be something like that.
Right.
So the more you train yourself to see and think in ways that are in line with the patterns and geometry and such that underlie matter and energy in the universe, then the more clearly you should understand those phenomena, and the more insight you would gain. That's it seems like that would be the case,
Yeah.
and it seems as though, at least anecdotally, experientially, in my own experience and in my experience of dealing with others, just as what you were saying, people who have been exposed to a different worldview is the way that I've heard it presented in a lot of circles. A worldview, more of a, for lack of a better word, a holistic worldview, where you start to think and understand in terms of whole systems and interconnected systems that become overall whole systems, then you start to see things differently. What was it? Wayne Dyer had a great quote. He said, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change."
Yeah. I love that quote.
Mm-hmm. So I think it basically goes along those lines.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
how I see it.
That's kind of what I was hinting at with the fractal eyes, or once you know how fractal geometry works, you can't unthink that. And then all of a sudden that you see it everywhere, and then it becomes even more fascinating.
Right.
And 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 you realize that it's patterns of chaos. Even though it looks like a chaotic system, there's a simple underlying pattern to it.
Right. And, at least, again, when you change the way you think, then it literally physically restructures your brain, and therefore you are physically different just by learning or changing the way you think, the patterns that you use to
Yep.
think and understand your surroundings.
Self-healing in the
So at least
placebo.
at least at that level, right there is a correlation towards things like that. Your thoughts actually physically affect physical matter, because when you think, when you learn, you change the way that you think or change patterns, then you actually physically grow new neurons in different shapes and patterns. So right there is a correlation that says thoughts do affect physical matter. So again, another small deal that points to much bigger implications in the realms of science and physics.
Yeah, I think that that ultimately there's a dreaming world and a waking and a sleeping world, charge and charge separation. We're being charged and charge separated from charge every single night, melding with some sort of something, and that mind, like this, we can pull that energy in and focus those dreams and use that thought and walk with it until it becomes reality. Like anybody who's written a book or is doing a podcast or is a YouTuber, or I like to use newer lingo, because video is really the medium to showcase all uh not almost not everything, but almost all talents, a lot of different types of talents that people have. You can do it all through video, motion, through podcast. You can hear, you can see what people are creating. It's just so expressionate. The eyeball and the neocortex that was developed because of our sight and our vision.
Right. The way I kind of conceptualize that sort of thing is that if you look at it again in sort of like an octave scaling type situation or a fractal scaling, so if you want to talk about, say, being able to get your point across, and that the words that you use are not necessarily the message that you're sending.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that through text and things like that. When you don't have tone, you don't have the nonverbal communication skills and things like that, then the message can be skewed. So when you take, say, base form of mass communication, written word, for however many thousand years, that was pretty much the only way, other than word of mouth, to get a message across.
Mm-hmm.
You add another fractal scale to that, so now you've got, instead of written word, you've got radio. So now you've got actual voice, and in the voice you can listen to inflections and things like that. So you've raised the density level of the information
Mm-hmm.
that you're putting out. Again, video is, again, now you're adding another scale onto it, and you're adding those visual cues. Now they can see your body language. Now things
Yep.
of that nature. So for me, when I look at it, it's not that, because for thousands of years, when we only had books, written words, or things like that, the message still gets through. And you can look at it too, where the intent, again, if you come to the paradigm of that biological technology is the ultimate technology, then the intent in the message is imprinted in the information that person is putting out as they're writing it. So especially things like if it's handwritten, things like that. So again, handwritten things would be you would have multiple scalar layers that imprint that information into the written word. And so there are different levels, again, nested within.
But we already knew the word, and that's why the beginning was it's like we already knew the word, and the beginning was the word, and the word became flesh. And that whole ideation, that whole nesting of it reminded me of your illustration of the nesting densities of information.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I like those two parallels.
Very nice. On that note, we probably should end the show before it runs about 3 hours.
Yeah. I think it's a good time. You're right.
Break it up into 2 shows.
Yep. And I'll send that invite out to you for this weekend, and have a good week, Will.
Absolutely.
It was awesome talking to you, man.
Definitely. Give me a call anytime.
All right. Thank you, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right. Yes, sir.
All right. Bye.
Episode 18, Will Dale. The Universal Ones is a Love is Watching production. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here. Next week we have John Stewart Reed, the inventor of the CymaScope. You're not going to want to miss that episode. If you like my content, you can find me on YouTube on The Bright and Buddy Show, The Electric View, and The Geometric View.